Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are diving into the absolutely astonishing and, let's be honest, kind of terrifying biological weapons that nature has engineered over millions of years. We humans often like to think of ourselves as sitting pretty comfortably right at the top of the food chain. But as you'll see, the natural world is just packed with creatures that have evolved mechanisms of mortality that are so incredibly efficient, they completely bypass our modern medical marvels. So let's kick things off with a pretty provocative question. Just how fragile is human life when we're pitted against the animal kingdom's deadliest adaptations? When we picture dangerous animals, we usually imagine, I don't know, massive jaws or razor-sharp claws, right? But the truth is, some of the absolute most lethal creatures on Earth don't need to overpower us in some kind of wrestling match. They literally just need a fraction of a second to deploy their weapons, and a few short minutes for those weapons to finish the job. 2 minutes. Just let that sink in. That staggering number is literally all the time it takes for the venom of the Australian box jellyfish to induce complete cardiovascular collapse and cardiac arrest in a perfectly healthy human. It's widely considered the fastest-acting venom known to science. But it begs the question, how exactly does it, and other biological weapons like it, work so incredibly fast? Well, here's our roadmap to figure that out. First, the race against time. Second, chemical warfare, the neurotoxins. Third, cardiotoxins and tissue destroyers. Fourth, the poisonous and the provoked. Fifth, sheer force, speed, and strength. And finally, number 6, the evolutionary arms race. All right, let's jump right into part 1. The race against time, looking at the fastest killers on the planet. Okay, so take a look at this. These are the microscopic nematocysts of the box jellyfish firing. You can basically think of them as millions of tiny biological poison-tipped harpoons covering tentacles that can stretch up to 10 feet long. And here's the crazy part. When they're triggered by even the lightest touch, these biological syringes fire instantly. They inject this incredibly complex cocktail of proteins and pore-forming toxins that aggressively attack the victim's cell membranes. The result? A hyper-rapid cardiovascular collapse. It's so fast that death can actually come before a swimmer even makes it back to the shore. Moving right along to part 2, chemical warfare, the neurotoxins, or how nature goes about short-circuiting the nervous system. The absolute crucial thing to understand here is that neurotoxins shut down the body's communication lines. Imagine taking a pair of scissors and just cutting the wires between a computer and a machine. The machine itself might be totally fine structurally, but it simply cannot operate. And honestly, this is where it gets terrifying. Because a victim of a neurotoxic bite often remains completely conscious. Their brain is fully active, but they suddenly find themselves entirely unable to move or, most fatally, unable to breathe. If we look at this comparison of lethal times for the world's deadliest snakes, the sheer power of these neurotoxins is just staggering. Look right at the top there at the inland taipan. Now, this is actually a pretty shy snake from the Australian desert, but it packs enough venom in one single bite to take down 100 adult humans. 100. Then you've got the black mamba in Africa. Its bite is considered 100% fatal if it goes untreated. And the king cobra? Well, it's so massive and injects such a huge volume of neurotoxins that it can completely shut down a human's respiratory system in a mere 15 minutes. And hey, it's not just snakes doing this. Take a look at the rapid progression of symptoms from the beautiful but incredibly deadly blue-ringed octopus. Its venom contains tetrodotoxin, which is a neurotoxin that's actually 1,000 times more potent than cyanide. Because their little parrot-like beak is so tiny, the bite itself is often completely painless. You might not even know what happened. But within minutes, the victim experiences tingling, followed by total muscle paralysis, and finally respiratory failure in roughly 10 minutes. And to make matters even worse, there is literally no known antidote. That brings us to part 3, cardiotoxins and tissue destroyers, where we look at venom specifically attacking the heart and blood. Now, unlike neurotoxins that kind of silently cut the communication wires, cardiotoxins are loud and violently destructive. They act directly on the cardiovascular system. This causes wild, irregular heart rhythms, severe drops in blood pressure, and a highly painful, full-body systemic collapse. So if neurotoxins are a clean wire cut, cardiotoxins are much more like a massive internal demolition. A creature that perfectly represents this brute force chemical approach is the gaboon viper. This massive snake, native to Central Africa, might look pretty sluggish as it camouflages itself in the leaf litter, but make no mistake, its bite delivers an absolutely unbelievable volume of cardiotoxic venom, up to 2 full grams. Just to put that into perspective for a snake, that is an absurdly massive payload. It injects all of this through the longest fangs of any snake on Earth, and that payload can begin completely disrupting mammalian heart functions in just 15 minutes. But it's definitely not just snakes utilizing these cardiotoxins. There's a rare, pretty tragic anecdote that really grounds this science in human reality. A 34-year-old named Christopher Ward was actually bitten by his pet Gila monster. Now, unlike snakes that strike and immediately release, this lizard held on and chewed its venom into him for 4 agonizing minutes. Because of that chewing motion, it delivered 10 times the normal amount of venom. The result was a horrifyingly rapid cardiovascular response and anaphylactic shock just 15 minutes after the lizard finally let go. All right, let's shift to part 4, the poisonous and the provoked, focusing on passive but deadly defenses. Now, before we go further, it is absolutely vital to separate these two terms, because people mix them up all the time. Venom is a weapon of active injection. Think of the fangs of a Sydney funnel web spider violently piercing through a boot. Poison, on the other hand, is a passive defense mechanism. Basically, you have to, unfortunately, trigger it yourself by touching or eating the animal, like if you were to consume an improperly prepared tiger pufferfish. To really understand how deadly a passive defense can be, look no further than the golden poison frog of Colombia. This tiny, bright yellow amphibian is only about 6 centimeters long, but literally just touching its bare skin can be fatal. Its spattrotoxins interfere with nerve cells so violently that one single little frog holds enough poison to stop the hearts of 20 adult humans. So, general rule of thumb here, do not try to pet the bright yellow frog. In fact, indigenous hunters use these frogs to craft toxic darts that remain completely lethal for years, which just proves how incredibly potent and chemically stable this passive barrier truly is. Let's move to part 5, sheer force, speed, and strength. I like to call this the blunt trauma plot twist. When you think of a hippopotamus, you probably imagine this slow, lounging herbivore just chilling in a river, right? But their size-to-speed ratio is frankly terrifying. While an average human might sprint at roughly 10 to 13 miles per hour on a good day, a highly territorial hippo can reach up to 19 miles per hour. This massive beast, weighing up to 1,500 kilograms, can easily outrun a human on land. And it's exactly this unexpected, explosive speed that makes them responsible for up to 3,000 human deaths annually across Africa. And get this, it turns out that even at 1,500 kilograms, a sprinting hippo utilizes a trotting gait that is so insanely powerful, it actually has all 4 feet off the ground 15% of the time. No joke, it literally achieves an airborne phase. It's an absolute biological marvel of muscle over mass, evolutionarily built to just crush threats instantly. Now, we see sheer force applied a bit differently when we look at the reticulated python. Reaching a massive 10 meters in length and weighing up to 75 kilograms, this constrictor really doesn't need to chase you down. Once it loops around its prey, it uses its immense musculature to just squeeze. And contrary to popular belief, a python doesn't actually kill by suffocating you or crushing your bones. Nope. It squeezes so incredibly tightly that it immediately holds all cardiovascular function. The blood simply cannot flow, and the heart physically cannot beat against the pressure. In this scenario, death takes only minutes. Which brings us to our final section, part 6, the evolutionary arms race and why nature seemingly overcompensates. So after seeing all of this, you've got to wonder why. Well, this quote from BBC Science Focus perfectly explains the core reason. We're looking at an ancient, unseen biological competition. As prey animals evolve thicker skin, faster reflexes, or even internal chemical resistances to these toxins, the predators have to adapt by becoming overwhelmingly deadlier. It's just a never-ending arms race that's been running for millions of years, which is exactly why we end up with venoms packed with hundreds of specialized enzymes today. And that ancient arms race leads to what looks like massive overcompensation to us. The black mamba, for instance, doesn't just inject enough venom to kill a small rodent. No, it injects up to 12 times the lethal human dose in one single strike. Why go to such extremes? Simply to absolutely guarantee that its prey cannot escape into a burrow, or worse, injure the snake in a prolonged struggle. You see, the goal of nature isn't fairness at all, it's pure efficiency and survival. Which brings us right to our final thought for today. The box jellyfish's harpoons, the mamba's neurotoxins, the hippo's absolutely terrifying sprint, none of these things were designed specifically to hunt humans. In an evolutionary arms race that's been millions of years in the making, we humans are usually just stumbling into the crossfire. Thanks so much for joining this explainer. I really hope this leaves you with a fascinating new perspective to ponder the next time you decide to step out into the wild. Keep learning, and as always, stay curious.